one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
That was a little fast.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't keep up. Oh, well. I'll re-pledge later.
We trust you. Okay. Mr. Villalobos, will you give us the TV coverage announcement and then move on to the roll call?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County and Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, Salinas Valley, Santa Maria, and Orcutt areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Now for roll call. Commissioner Bradley. Here. Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
Commissioner Farini.
Here.
And Chair Park.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. So our next item is election of our 2019 Planning Commission Vice Chair. So we have a vacancy because Cecilia Brown left the commission. And Mr. Villalobos, how do we go about doing this? Do we take nominations, or do we just point at the person we want, or what do we do?
Yeah, what you would do is you would just ask for a nomination, and then hope maybe you get a second, and then you vote on that.
God, it's just like high school glee club. All right. Then do I hear a nomination for Vice Chair?
I would nominate Laura Bridley if she's so willing.
And I'll second that.
All right.
I'm willing if we remember that it's Bridley. Sorry.
Duly noted.
Commissioner Brady. I'm willing. Thank you.
Normally I'd be concerned about that with my last name. You see how it's butched.
Oh, we can talk about that for hours on our names. Okay, then are there any other nominations?
Mr. Chair, I
Mr.
think
Cooney.
I move that the nominations be closed and that we vote by unanimous vote in support of the nomination.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You're elected. Okay. We'll tell you about what your responsibilities are come January. Okay, our agenda status report. Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Commission. The agenda status report as of today is we have one item that was continued, which is the first item on the agenda from the Earth LLC retail cannabis delivery that was continued to bring back to the Commission with findings for denial. And staff is prepared and ready to present on those findings to the Commission today. And then we have a telecom project as item number 2, and staff is prepared to present on that item as well.
Okay. Will you move on to the projection report?
Chair, members of the Commission, looking at the projection report, our next scheduled hearing is September 4th. It's noted that Commissioner Cooney will be absent. There are 2 items that are listed on that. There's an appeal of a proposed fence and a appeal of a homestay application that is projected for that hearing date, and that would be here in Santa Barbara. The September 11th hearing, as indicated at prior meetings, was canceled, and then a special hearing was moved and agreed upon to be heard on September 13th, which is a Friday, and that would be located in Santa Maria. And on that date, there is a presentation by staff on the program EIR related to the cannabis regulations, as well as 2 appeals of cannabis cultivation operations in the inland area along Highway 246. Following that hearing, our next hearing will be on September 25th, and there are 4 items projected at that time. We have the Helistop application that was continued to that date on September 25th. There are 2 appeals. The Cosmoledo appeal along Sandpoint Road is coming back to the Planning Commission for review and consideration, as well as appeal of accessory structure. And then long-range planning is bringing the Santa Claus Lane beach access and streetscape improvement plan on that date. and that is September 25th. Our hearing after that is October 2nd. Currently, there are no items projected at this point on that hearing date. And then on October 9th, we have a hearing scheduled for Santa Maria. There's an appeal of a cannabis cultivation application and then a tentative parcel map proposed on October 9th. Following October 9th, we will be reconvening on October 30th, and that is in Santa Barbara. There is the Arroyo Paradon Bridge replacement project is coming for the Planning Commission, as well as a cannabis, I think this item was moved off of the 30th. So as of right now, there's only one item on that. The item that's projected on October 30th, it was moved, is looking at being rescheduled to November 6th, and that is the appeal of the Hacienda cannabis cultivation. So that's, we're working with all the parties involved in that particular appeal. We're waiting to hear back from the appellants to have their concurrence to having that heard on November 6th. In addition, on November 6th, there is a potential of another appeal of a project in the Carpinteria area to be heard on November 6th, as well as the zoning ordinance package amendments to be presented by Long Range Planning Division to the Planning Commission. So on October 30th, one item. November 6th, there's potentially three items. And then moving down the projection report, November 13th, we have three items listed. Two appeals of homestay permits, and then a application for cannabis cultivation on that date as well. And then looking at the rest of the projection report, there are no items projected past November 13th. However, for the commission to be aware of, working with staff and looking further down the road, just wanted to bring it up for the commission's consideration. Not that we have to take action today, but just to provide greater flexibility in the North County, in addition to number of cannabis cultivation applications coming before the Planning Commission as direct items, either a conditional use permit or development plan. There's a potential for those coming to hearing in November or December, as well as any appeals that we get in the next future. In addition, we have some development projects in the Santa Maria area, Orchid area, that we are currently working on putting on the projection report. Dates have not been set. Both of those projects are, the first one is Keysite 21. The public review period has closed. Staff is meeting today with the applicants team to review and come up with a schedule on responding to comments. So Keysite 21 was looking at maybe later November or early December. And then in addition, Oasis, we are anticipating getting that draft EIR out early September for public review for 45 days, and Oasis would be, depending on the comments received, could be coming before the Planning Commission in December as well. So one item is based on potential anticipated items coming before the Planning Commission. In November, we only have two hearing dates scheduled. There is no hearing date for the week of Thanksgiving, so the Planning Commission may want to look at adding a special hearing if necessary. I know that sometimes is a difficult week to have hearings based on individual schedules, but there is an option potentially to have a hearing date on that week. I think there's no board hearing on that date, so we could potentially have hearings either Tuesday or Wednesday if we wanted to of that week, or we could add another hearing date as needed as we proceed through the year. For agenda management purposes, we're trying to make sure we have enough availability for members of the public to attend either the Keysite 21 or the Oasis project, as well as any of the cannabis projects that are coming forward. So that's looking towards the end of the year. We do have some rather large projects that could be coming for the Planning Commission, depending on how the response to comments in the EIR process works out. So that concludes the projection report.
Personally speaking, Mr. Wilson, I'm glad you brought up this question of scheduling. I know that staff is working really hard to process these different cannabis permits, and you need the hearing time. So it's good we deal with this. Personally, I'm game to have a hearing the day before Thanksgiving if other commissioners are able. And I was joking with you ahead of time that we ought to get Montecito Planning Commission to swap with us so we can steal their date of the 20th. But honestly, whenever they have their next hearing and you could find out if there's really matters scheduled for that or not, and if they have no schedule and they're glad to cancel it, we should grab that date. You know, the 20th of November. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the problem that we found historically with the day before Thanksgiving is not just the commissioners, but also we have staff that might have vacations planned. Some take days off on that day, and I think we have to keep that in mind in scheduling. We certainly are flexible in terms of the following week or the week before. You know, we can find hearing dates, but I think the Wednesday before might be vulnerable. It's not my personal concern, but I have it for others that might be involved.
That's a good point. Good point. Okay, anybody else on this topic? Commissioner Blau? Oh, Commissioner Farini. Oh, well.
So see how badly he pronounced my name.
Yeah, exactly.
Off of that, but onto cannabis retail siting coming up. I'm getting a lot of questions out of the community right now about what's going on there and how that's going to occur and when it's going to occur. And I think it would be helpful if sooner than later staff could come back with us on explaining how that process is going to work, so that the public might be better aware.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farini, I'm going to talk a little bit about that during the director's report.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just to add to the discussion, I'm available the day before Thanksgiving. That's all I have to contribute at this point.
Okay. Now, Commissioner Blau.
Yeah. I'm kind of in Commissioner Cooney's camp. One of the things we did a few years ago when we set the schedule for PC hearings is we did the first, second, and last Wednesday of the month. And the whole idea is that there was 4 periods in the year where there was 3 weeks with no commission hearing, which was good for us to take vacations and schedule them, and good for the staff. I have no problem with special meetings. If you want to go the second Wednesday of November and the next day Thursday, that's fine by me. But I just sort of like to keep that, that third Wednesday of the month sort of as a sacred little animal, so that people can, for me, I mean, the vacations I'm buying now are expensive and not refundable. So, yes, just as a side. But for me, other special meetings, perfect. Oasis special meeting, I think it should be. I think I said so last time. Doesn't have to be a Wednesday. It could be Thursday or Tuesday. I don't really care.
Okay. Mr. Wilson?
And Chair Parker, Mr. Commissioner, I have one other item related to the projection report that I'd just like to have a brief discussion, or we can talk about it at the next hearing. Mr. Villalobos and I are looking at the schedule for next year, 2020, and looking at potential hearing dates and locations. So one item that I'd brought up with Mr. Villalobos was related to potentially increasing the hearings in Santa Maria offices due to the number of cannabis projects that are located in the Santa Maria area and other projects. So wanted to get some response from the Planning Commission today, because typically there's one hearing a month that's in Santa Maria. So we're thinking about adding maybe 2 hearings a month, at least initially, and we can always change those as needed. But looking at the projection report and location, what we're seeing is different applicants and or appellants are looking at the projection report and trying to forecast when their projects could be heard. And so if they want to have a hearing in Santa Maria, and if there's only one a month, some of the concern is that it pushes them back a month. And I know the Planning Commission has been really lenient on switching locations, so it might not be that big of an issue, but just want to get a quick read from the Planning Commission in regards to that proposal.
Commissioner Blau.
I'll just weigh in and say, for me, you keep the first meeting in Wednesday, the first meeting in Santa Barbara, the second meeting in Santa Maria, the last Wednesday of the month at the discretion of staff as they see fit. Fine by me. You guys determine, you know, the number of hearings you have to have for whatever part of the county it is, and you make the decision. And I think the way it works right now is you can make a decision with Chair Parks, but I don't know that if I were him, I'd want to be bothered. You tell me where the hearing should be, because I'm sure he's probably going to agree 99% of the time.
Anyone else? Commissioner Cooney?
I think it has been the case in the past. Maybe it's a long past. I confuse long past and recent past. But we did used to have a flexible last meeting of the month and up to staff. And, you know, the San Ynez Valley items have been put on South County agendas at some time and sometimes on North County. So we have some flexibility there. But whatever works best for the applicants and staff is fine with me.
I concur.
I would join with that. It has seemed to me over the last year and a half or so that the majority of what we're been involved with, and especially with getting public comment, has been North County, but that we're predominantly down here. And if there's a way to reverse that, I think that's a great thing to do. Hope that's responsive to your suggestion.
Chair Park, Mr. Commission, that's helpful. One thing that Mr. Villalobos and I will work together is we also need to work with the hearing location in Santa Maria just to make sure that that space is available. So we may lock in some dates up there just so that we have that flexibility if we want to pivot and have hearings in that location.
Commissioner Blau?
Except for the Board of Supervisors, who has priority beyond us.
Chair Park, members, Planning Commission, Nurse, Planning Commission, sorry. Threw me a curveball there. So there's a number of other entities. I think APCD holds hearings in that hearing room as well. And so it's really a matter of scheduling. And so when we try to move our dates, we just need to make sure that the room hasn't already been booked. And so that's why Mr. Villalobos and I are working right now to schedule in advance to make sure that we get, first pick of that room. And then if we don't need it, then we can release that room to other agencies to use. So there are other agencies that do use it other than us.
I get that, but are there other agencies that use this on a Wednesday?
Sometimes. So
Rare or?
So here's the deal. I think that just to answer your first question, I think that the board and the planning commission get first bite at the schedule, and but once we have those schedules set, and other agencies if we're not using the room, other agencies have the opportunity to book it, and so what we don't have the ability to do is then bump people from the room once it's been set.
Having said that, let's put all the last Wednesdays of the month in Santa Maria, and if we don't use it, they're welcome to reschedule. Does that solve the problem? That'll work. Good.
Good, do it. All right. And then we can blame it on Ms. Briley when she takes over as planning chair. There you go. Okay. Let's move on to public comment on items that are not on today's agenda. Do we have any speaker slips? Then we won't have any public comment. Oh, we do have one? No, okay. And next, move on to planning commissioners' informational reports. Do we have any informational reports? Mr. Riley?
I have to wait for you to call on me. I have to improve that. I'm
It's just
sorry.
like school.
I wanted to let the commission know that your county staff is actually very involved in the American Planning Association California Chapter Conference, which is going to be here in Santa Barbara, September 15th through the 18th. And I think there's even an early trip or something like that. But anyway, to have the American Planning Association California chapter have their conference here in Santa Barbara is rather a big deal. The last time it was done, I think, was maybe 28 or 29 years ago. I haven't been involved this time, but I was involved 28 years ago. So if anybody wants to attend, it's open to the public too, and there's even a whole day of planning commissioner sessions and things really focused on planning commissioner work. So I just thought I'd mention that, and maybe Mr. Wilson can tag on.
Tag on, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradley and Chair Park. So we are excited to have the APA conference coming to Santa Barbara. Our office is heavily involved in that. A number of individuals in our office is actually acting as co-chairs for the conference. So we're having a leadership role in the conference. In addition, there's a number of sessions that staff is actually leading at the conference. And so it's a great way to, one, not only support planning efforts in the Santa Barbara area, but a way to network throughout the state on other planning issues or other planning agencies throughout the agency. In addition, there's some mobile workshops that would be maybe very interesting for the public as well as the planning commissioners. We're trying to put together a mobile workshop that is focused on the debris flow and all the intricacies that were related to the response and the debris basins and the other projects related to that, as well as there's a mobile workshop for the Danger Bond Preserve to go out there and visit and view the Danger Bond Preserve and meet with the Executive Director of the Nature Conservancy that's leading kind of the operations at the Nature Conservancy. And so there's other mobile workshops that are related to the wine industry. I think there might be a mobile workshop related to housing. I think there's somebody very interested in that mobile workshop that's leading that. So Director Plowman's leading that workshop, so a big plug for that, and as well as other conferences and sessions. So we have keynote speaker is Senator Wiener that's coming down to open the conference on Monday morning. So we're excited for this conference. I think it's going to be great. It's a great way to highlight all the work that's been done in this area from both the city, the county, and our neighboring agencies. So thank you, Commissioner Bradley.
I've actually been asked to participate on a panel on, I think it's Sunday the 15th, on how an independent planning commissioner relates to staff. And I've been debating whether to invite all our staff or to ask you all to stay away. Let's see. Commissioner Cooney, it's your light.
This is a new one, a new subject, and it really is just a question. We received an email dated the 15th of August, and it's not agendized for any action, but it concerns the Dunn School conditional use permit. And all I would like to see is an update from staff on that. We had some extended deadlines for compliance, and the letter brings that subject to mind. So whenever staff finds an opportunity to bring it back, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Plowman, I cut you off.
That's okay. No problem.
ahead.
I just wanted to say a word of thanks to Jeff Wilson for his work on organizing the APA
Excellent.
California conference here, because he puts in long hours here, and then he walks over to another meeting and puts long hours there, and he's just done a tremendous amount of work, and he's really been actively encouraging our staff to get out into the conference sessions. And I think that we probably have we'll have a record attendance at this particular conference. The department hasn't in the past sent a lot of people to conferences, and it's something that I think is really important because you learn a lot about what other agencies are doing, what the current thinking is in the planning field, and I think it's an inspirational time too for young planners to be able to get out there and see what's happening and learn new things. And so I really appreciate all the work he's done. And I'm going to give an update on Dunn School in my director's report.
Great. You know, to follow up on your comments, I attended the Citizens Planning Academy last year, and it kind of reminded me of this. And we had a great showing of staff, and it was great for them to network with everybody, and I appreciated everyone that helped put that together. So I'm really all for things that get everybody out in the world. Good. Okay, let's move on to our minutes. We have the 31st of July, the 8th of August, and the 14th of August all to consider. Does anyone have any comments on the July 31 minutes? Mr. Cooney?
Just a minor thing. I noticed on several of these, and I'll call it to the commission's attention when we come to those other agendas. But on this one, at the very end, there's some standard language that's put in about the meeting being adjourned to a future date, and this one, for example, spoke of August 8th, and that one's correct. I believe we had a meeting on the 8th. But if we look ahead at the next two, they're both for fictional dates, so we need to correct those in the final.
Okay.
So I'll move approval of the July 31st minutes as written.
I'll second them.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's move on to August 8th. Does anyone have?
Pardon me, I just want to be on the record for abstaining because I wasn't on the commission at that time.
Right.
Thank you.
August 8th. Do we have any comments on the August 8 minutes? Mr. Cooney?
Yes, this is the first, it refers at the end to a meeting April 29, 2015. And while I'm sure there was a meeting on the 15th of April 2015, we needed to correct the date for that one. Computers take over sometimes, David, so I'm sure that's the instance here. Subject to that change, I would move approval of the August 8th minutes as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Freeney. All in favor, please say aye, except for the extension. Ms. Bridley?
Aye.
Okay. Well, now how about the August 14th minutes? Do we have a comment on that?
Yes, I do.
Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you. On this one, just a question about our action, and I'll look to Commissioner Farini for his memory of this, but item 22 of the conditions of approval that were amended, this is on page 5 of the minutes. I was looking at the parking lot cleaning hours and just wanted to be sure those were those that we decided. I know there was a change in Commissioner Farini's motion, so if he could clarify that, that was my main concern. And then also the April 29, 2015 reference at the end needs to be corrected.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. I did not have the 14th minutes in my packet, so I'm going to review Mr. Villalobos's real quick. And that was item 22 on the
Page 5.
page 5, yeah,
Condition
mitigation.
22D.
Okay.
Why don't you take a moment, Mr. Freeney, and review that? We can deal with it right now today.
And so I do recall that we did change the hours. What was your concern, Commissioner Cooney?
Well, we limited it to weekend days for the cleaning. I just didn't think we had extended it as late as 9 p.m. on weekend days. You know, it may be necessary to have a day of cleaning, but I would think they'd be able to finish by 6 p.m. And if we decided that way, though, I'm not suggesting we go back and revisit the issue. It's just a question of what we did.
I don't have those details in front of me. If we needed staff to go back and review the record, maybe we should postpone voting on these until staff comes back at a later time.
That'd be great. I'm sure they can check it quickly.
Does that cause a problem for the project if we postpone approval of the minutes?
Just till later today.
Till later
We could
today?
trail it till later
Great.
in.
The project's already been appealed to the
Yeah.
board.
Oh, it has. Okay, so we will trail the consideration of the August 14th minutes till the end of the hearing. We'll make it a special afternoon hearing. No, we won't. We'll follow the rest. Okay.
So
Let's-
before you move off on that, can I?
Yes, Commissioner Blau?
So, Ms. Richardson, I recused myself from that hearing because I own a property right next door to it.
That's right.
Now that it's been approved by the commission, are there any reasons I can't talk about or give the rest of the commission some additional information for future projects?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Blau, you mean on that site?
Mm-hmm.
I'd recommend against it, one, because it's not agendized, and also this project could potentially come back for revisions or,
Okay, great, thanks.
oh, and it's also been appealed to the board.
And it was appealed by the applicant,
No, a neighborhood group.
a neighborhood group. That's interesting.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Blau, residents for Orchid Sensible Growth appealed the project.
Okay.
Okay, then let's move on to the director's report. Ms. Plowman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the commission, I want to update you what's been happening at the Board of Supervisors. Last week, the board took action on the appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to approve or not uphold the appeal of G&K Farms, and they went ahead and denied the appeal, and so that project will be moving forward. They also took action on the business license amendments, and so there is now a cap of 1,575 acres in the inland and coastal non-carp areas. So everywhere else except Carpinteria, which already had its own cap of 186 acres, will be going into effect in 30 days from yesterday. They had the second reading yesterday. And there were other changes to that business license ordinance which allow for some processing adjustments. One is that once an cannabis application has been accepted by the department, because there are a few steps that happen before we actually accept it in, we want to make sure their applications are as complete as possible. They will be able to then submit an application for the business license so it can sort of move along at a similar pace as the entitlements. They won't be able to issue the business license until we have issued our permit. But there are issues that come up during the business license process that relate to things that we would want to be talking about during the entitlement process, like some issues around with the fire department, et cetera. So we think that's going to be a better process in the long run. In addition, they will also be able to hold a place in line, if you will, once we've approved our permits prior to the issuance, but once we've approved them, they then sort of pull a ticket in the CEO's office for a place in line for a business license, so that people who have been in the process a long time working to get a business license don't get miss out on getting that license if they have multiple appeals. In some cases, particularly in the coastal zone, you could have appeals all the way up to the Coastal Commission, which could take a year or more to resolve. And so the objective of the CEO's office and the board was to allow people who at least have worked through our process and gotten an approval of a permit to be able to get in line for that business license. So that has gone into effect. There were other couple minor changes. And as I said, the second reading happened yesterday, and those changes will go into effect in 30 days. I wanted to let you know that, as we mentioned earlier, Keysite 2 was appealed to the Board of Supervisors. Also, the Planning Commission's decision on Elwood Quarry was appealed to the Board of Supervisors. So we'll be taking those items up. I think we'll probably be there in November? Something like that, November with those items. Mr. Police appealed the Elwood decision. We have Patterson Avenue appeal going on the 10 10th of September. And then the Nye Tennis Court appeal is going on the 1st of October to the board. Regarding retail cannabis, one of the things that came out of the hearing on the 20th was a decision to change the retail cannabis process from a lottery to a ranking system. And so that means that the CEO's office is going to have to develop certain standards where I'm assuming, and I don't know this for sure, but you'll get points for certain things in your application. And so we'll probably be assisting the CEO's office as they develop that. But there are a lot of jurisdictions that have already done that. And so we'll be looking to those jurisdictions, or the CEO's office will be looking to those jurisdictions to see how they're managing that process. But the board felt like they wanted to make sure that the best operators were the ones that received the ability to operate a storefront operation, and not somebody who just was picked out of a hat. Even though there are some issues with that as well, right? There's some people raise the issue about the perception of it not being completely an independent, unbiased process. But I think board came down on the side of wanting to really understand what those operations were like and being able to score them in a certain way that ensured that we had really great operators in those 8 locations. Regarding the Dunn School, we did receive the complaint. We have opened up an investigation, a zoning enforcement investigation, and we're going to be pursuing that. I'm working with them. And then I did want to announce that we have been working very, very hard to hire new planners. And we had some extra cannabis positions that were open, and then we had vacant positions. And we have, is it 9? 10 new planners that are going to be starting over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we're really excited about the new staff that's going to be coming in, and we're working on a training program for them. And we're in the process of hiring the deputy director, and we hope to have that finally resolved this week. And then we've got we're pursuing 2 supervising planner positions. We just closed the recruitment on that. So we're really getting the department up and running, and I'm really looking forward to working with these new planners. So if you see them, say hello and welcome them.
And so they're mostly, where are they in the level of things?
We have hired a number of planner 1s. We have hired a new planner 3. And then we've done some internal promotions. And so we have Ray Harmon, who's an internal promotion, Gwen Baylor, Sean Stewart. All those 3 were promoted to planner 3s. And then Melanie Jackson, too. Yeah. And we rehired a gentleman by the name of Stephen Peterson, who used to be a supervising planner here. And he's going to be working as a planner 3 in North County. He did a lot of work in Orcutt.
You know, I have Mr. Cooney.
Just on that matter, Ms. Plowman, congratulations. That's a huge job. Recruiting is time-consuming. If it's done right, it's very thorough, and I'm sure that's the case with your group. It is helpful from time to time to have contact information for the planning commissioners. We'll see a project that isn't even before us, therefore we don't have ready access to the contact information. But it's been a long time since we've had an updated contact sheet, so sure. I hope we can add everybody new to that, and we'll make an effort to touch base with them.
Yeah.
Commissioner Blau?
I would love to have a little spreadsheet that has everybody in planning and development. Email addresses, phone numbers. It would really be helpful.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, what we have developed, we're in the process of finishing it up. My assistant is doing it. We have what we call a Smiling Faces phone sheet. that has a photograph and their contact information. So because we have so many staff and we have separate offices, and that's an internal document, but we can certainly share that with the Planning Commission. And I think we will also be sharing, we have information that goes out on each new planner with a photograph of them that goes to the entire staff. And we'll go ahead and forward those to the commission too, so you can get a name with a face.
That'd be really good.
That'd be great. I will tell you, I love the fact, I don't mind the fact that I get projection reports every 3 days from David, from Mr. Villalobos. Sorry about that. But I do love it because it's
Good
like,
memory.
you know, before I go and schedule a vacation or schedule a meeting, I go look at the most recent one he sent me. So I could get a spreadsheet that's, you have a new employee, you lose an employee, just email me a new one. It just would be so much nicer.
That's great. Question about the cannabis inland cultivation cap. Okay. And how that relates to our hearings. If we delay approval or action on something, as we've done in the Pence appeals, for example, does that cause people to lose their place in line somehow for where they're going to be in that cap?
Mr. Chair, if they received an approval from our department, they are then in line.
Got it.
If it's a decision that's made by the Planning Commission,
Like a CUP?
like a CUP, then that, if
development
that
plan.
were continued and action were not taken, that would delay the approval of that permit. But the staff-approved permits, they will get their place in line. And then if they never receive entitlements, obviously, they drop off that list. But it's the approval of the permit that allows them to take that spot in line.
Now, I know when something similar came up with regard to Carpinteria, there was, maybe it was when we were considering the G&K appeal, we heard some information contrasting the total number of acres that were applied for with the cap. It appeared there were more being applied for than the cap. By analogy, what situation do we have for this 1,075 acre thing? Do we have more applied for, less?
Just recently. Mr. Chair, when we initially set the cap, there was a little bit of headroom there, just a small amount, but now we have more applications in. But here's how the process will work. Just like in Carpinteria, it's not the entitlement process that has the cap, it's the business license process. And so we will process entitlements as long as people want them. And so those people can gain approvals with the hope that somebody will not have a renewed business license or they will fall off the list. So you may continue to see applications come through here or appeals come through here, this hearing body, because people are hoping that they'll get a spot at some point in the future. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what it was. So Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the cap was set at the amount that had been submitted on July 9th, and then subsequent to that hearing date, new applications came in.
Okay.
Jeff, do you know, Mr. Wilson, do you know the, where we are? Or Mr. Clement? Okay.
Commissioner Blau?
It's over 2,000 acres. So that includes carp. Okay.
So, Ms. Plowman, what I understood from a couple conversations yesterday is that you're likely to have the criteria set for the merit-based retail outlets by the 1st of October so that they can make a decision prior to the end of the year. Is that what you understand at the current schedule?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Blau, I did not hear that, but that would be coming out of the CEO's office. And so, was that something they discussed at the board?
That's what I understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can get more information on that.
And the reason I understood that was because it was a 4-1 vote, I guess. And to go from the merit base to the lottery system was at the board.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
didn't.
that was the second reading of that, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bradley.
Thank you. Director Plowman, you said that one of the adjustments was to allow people to apply for the business license concurrently with the land use process, and so I guess I'm still a little confused. And I understand that the cap is relating to the business license, so people can plow through the land use entitlement process, but that early application of the business license doesn't vest them earlier in the list? I'm
Mr. Chair,
confused.
Commissioner Bradley, that's correct. It does not vest them to holding a spot in line because we don't want them holding a spot if their application is not something that can be supported or they ultimately withdraw it or something happens along those lines. So it was determined that it was the point of approval when you pulled your ticket and you stood in line for that acreage for the business
Oh,
license.
Okay, so after your LUP is
approved.
settled and, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There may be an appeal on it, but once you get that approval, you can stand in line for that
Oh, interesting.
cap.
Okay.
Yeah. All little tinkerings that need to be made once you get into the process and you sort of realize what unanticipated consequences occur. That
I have a
concludes
final
my-
question for
Sure.
you on your report. Commissioner Cooney asked about the status of the resolution of the complaints on the Dunn School project we approved. I'm going to ask about the Cracky Homestay project we didn't approve, and I understand there are some complaints there. And the reason I want to bring it up now, one is I just thought of it, and two, we have a hearing, I believe it is next week, on a homestay appeal in the 3rd District. And I think knowing how well people pay attention to our decisions or not, something I want to know about. Is that something you can
Mr.
report
Chair.
on now, or is it
Mr.
not
Chair,
possible?
on the Cracky homestay, we issued a notice of violation. They have indicated that they ceased operating it. We actually have a hearing, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the date. It's in September.
Is it
on
the 12th? Is it,
I think I mentioned, yeah, I believe that's correct.
I get a lot of emails from people.
Yes, I believe that's correct. Where they've appealed the fine that was determined. And so there'll be a discussion about that. But we're in communication with them and their attorney about what it is they can and cannot do on that property. But they have indicated they have ceased renting it in a manner that conflicts with or is inconsistent with our policies and requirements.
Well, great, I appreciate the report. Okay. Well, now we're ready to move on to our standard agenda. Mr. Villalobos, we read the first item into the record.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Park. The following is a hearing on the request of Stacy Wooten with CalCoast Compliance Agent From the Earth LLC to consider case number 19 CUP7, application filed on February 8, 2019.
Do we have any ex parte or site visit disclosures to be made? No? Okay, then let's move on to our staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The item before you today is a recommendation for denial and associated findings for the From the Earth non-storefront retail conditional use permit. On August 8th, 2019, the Commission considered the From the Earth delivery of the project, the item before you. Following a presentation from staff and hearing from the applicant and the public, the Commission closed the public comment period and brought the item back to the Commission for discussion. And after considering the merits of the project, the Commission voted to continue the item to the August 28th, 2019 hearing and directed staff to prepare the findings and recommendation for denial. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission take the following actions. First, to deny the project, case number 19 CUP 07, make the required findings for denial of the project, and determine that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Public Resources Code 21080B5 and State CEQA Guidelines Sections 15061A and 15270A. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Do we have any questions from our planning commissioners? Okay, then let's move on to any presentation that the applicant has to make. Applicant here?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you again for hearing me. I guess I'm still just trying to...
Would you mind stating your name
Oh,
again?
I'm sorry.
for-
I'm
it's Mr.
David
Moss,
Moss.
isn't it? Yeah, that's right.
I'm David Moss. I'm just still trying to kind of understand the whole process and the reason for denial, which seems to be that it's a non-retail store in a walking area of Orchid. Had I known that in advance, I might have suggested that, we create a retail space or a walk-in space that would create that walk-in traffic that is either a community resource center or a CBD store, something that really doesn't require any kind of CUP. But having said that, and I realize that this isn't the place or the time to present that, I guess my question to you all is, I've been informed that when this is denied here by this commission, our next step is to potentially appeal to the supervisors. And if we don't win that appeal, I was informed that we can't apply again for another year unless it's a completely different use. And I guess my question to you is, now that retail stores are finally, and we would have applied for a retail store had that actually been out, but it wasn't out, and it still isn't out. And now knowing that that is coming, if we're denied here and denied at the supervisor level, are we able to apply for a retail store in that location when those applications are released? Or will we be held to a 1-year moratorium before we can reapply?
Our procedures manual says that members of the public don't ask staff questions directly, but they can ask them through the chair. So you've just asked the question, and I'm the chair, and I'm going to ask staff to respond to that question.
Chair Park, members of the commission. So for the record, my name is Dan Clement, Deputy Director of Long Range Planning. So Land Use and Development Code Section 35.84.050 sets forth the reapplication procedures. And I'm summarizing what it says. For the record, I'm not stating it verbatim, but essentially what it says is that if an application has been made and denied by the county, which covers substantially the same real property, so that clearly would apply, and which requests approval of substantially the same project. If that's the case, then you may not reapply for 12 months after the denial decision. However, if it's a different site or it's a different project that's substantially different, they may reapply within 12 months. So the basis of your denial decision today, at least according to the findings that we drafted, were based primarily on the fact that the project doesn't comply with the pedestrian-oriented goals of the Orcutt Community Plan, as well as the fact that the plan really is intended to have walkable establishments like a retail storefront there. If they did add a retail storefront, it could be found that that is a substantially different project, because now it's the issue that was the reason for the denial has now gone away. You've got a substantially different project, so it could be possible for them to reapply. But we'd have to see a specific proposal before us to make that determination. So,
Who makes that determination?
That would be staff as to whether or not we're going to accept that application. So,
Okay, so Mr. Moss, standing there can think that if he seeks to add retail, probably he won't run into that 1-year problem, but he might. And what about if Mr. Moss finds a space, hypothetically, in Orcutt that's not a storefront, it's interior to a parking lot within a block or two? Is that a different enough project that it's not subject to the 1-year rule because it's different real estate?
Chair Park, I don't like to opine on hypotheticals. I could see a situation where that could occur. I could also see a situation where that would not occur, depending on the specifics. Like, let's say they just move into the back site and it's essentially the same area. I would have difficulty making the finding that it's not the same real substantially the same real property, but let's say it's a quarter to a mile away, different ownership. I could see how that would be a different situation. Once again, these are hypotheticals. I could see it going either way, depending on what's specifically proposed and where it's proposed.
Okay. Commissioner Freeney, did you have a follow-up on these questions?
I'm not sure if Commissioner Cooney was before me.
Oh,
or-
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure either, but let me just raise the legal concern I'm feeling. It's perfectly fine for Mr. Moss to raise a question in the context of our hearing today, which is to determine whether our prior decision is to be upheld. But he has to make a decision based on the law, which Mr. Clement read, staff's opinion of it, of whether he'd be able to reapply. And I don't want anything that we say today to encourage him or discourage him one way or the other. Our hearing is very narrow. His question is legitimate, but it's for staff. And you have a period of time, if you choose to appeal, within which to get staff's opinion. So you could be better informed whether to appeal or when, should the commission continue with its denial today.
Could I ask another question? If I don't
Well,
appeal,
Let's
Oh, I'm
let
sorry.
me finish with comments, from commissioners.
I'm going to ask
Commissioner
that.
Freeney and Mr. Blau also.
I'm going to ask that one for you.
thank you.
So is one of his choices where he could withdraw the application entirely today and 3 months from now, 6 months from now, bring a whole new application, so he doesn't go through the pain of having to wait? I mean, if he's not going to get an approval, he could withdraw his application. He's the same spot he was before he started.
That's correct. He can do that.
So you could withdraw your application today, and 3 months from now, come up with a brand new one for the same location. I think that's the question he was going to ask, which is the one I would ask.
That was my question.
So Chair Park, members of the commission, I appreciate Commissioner Cooney's questions. It sounds like the applicant, there's some options. It sounds like the applicant has some questions to staff. If you want to take a break, we could confer with him on some of these items that seems to be relevant to staff. Otherwise, the applicant does have some options today, and I think Commissioner Cooney articulated them correctly. Commission can go forward with a decision. The applicant has a choice to, depending on what the outcome of that is, he could appeal it, and then there's decision points after that. But those are some things that staff could articulate to him about that, as well as whether withdrawing the application. We seem to be going down a path that is not what's agendized today as far as the questions he's asking. In addition, there may be other permit requirements based on how he changes his project that could come into play as well. So there's a lot of different factors, and I appreciate Mr. Clement's comments as well. We're starting to get speculative and things outside of what is agendized today as far as our discussions.
Although I must say, I think that these questions being raised, it could impact how we act today. So it's fair to discuss it now. Commissioner Blau?
Well, I just wonder if I want to prevail on Commissioner Farida to move for a continuance, giving the applicant the opportunity to figure out what best he wants to do. He can meet with he can meet with the staff, he can meet with whatever, but let's continue it. And if he decides to drop the application, good. We won't see it again. It disappears. If he wants to bring it back and once a denial, we'll give them one. But just trying to be customer friendly here.
Well, it's just about break time anyway, so let's take a 5-minute break and discuss these different things.
Mr. Chair, before we break, I'll add a concern. We have agendized this for action today. There are at least 5 speaker slips I saw of members of the public that would like to address the issue. So regardless of whether there's a withdrawal of the application or a continuance, I think the public ought to be allowed to comment on our action in that regard.
I will make sure of that. Okay, we're on break. Okay, we'll be back in session. And Mr. Moss was still making his presentation. He asked some questions. We referred them to staff. So why don't you go ahead, Mr. Moss?
So at this point, after conferring with staff, I think I would like to withdraw our application, formally withdraw our application at this time.
Okay. And does that need action by the commission?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, what I would recommend is, because this is agendized, the applicant has said he wants to withdraw his application, we should still take public comment, and then the motion for the commission would be to drop the item from our agenda.
Okay.
I can actually speak for the public comment. It's really not necessary. I think they're all going to come up and withdraw their comments based on us withdrawing the application.
I looked over our speaker slips. It looks like 4 slips related to From the Earth, but we actually have another slip from Thomas Ponto, and it appears to be, he must be in Santa Maria, which appears to be in opposition to it. Can we, why don't you go ahead and sit down? You're done with your presentation. We'll go on to public comment. Is Mr. Ponto in Santa Maria and ready to speak? Mr. Ponto.
Yes,
And so you're Thomas Ponto. Would you just state your name for the record, make sure we have the right name and right place?
yes, I'm Thomas Ponto.
Okay, and will you take 3 minutes to state your position on this?
Okay, the proposed From the Earth warehouse site should be reserved for retail space that generates foot traffic. The conversion of a storefront space to a non-storefront distribution center is going against the traditional theme of Old Orchid. Warehouses are not locations of public activity. To me, a warehouse is found in an off the main street backyard location with locked doors, guards, and covered windows. Placing a warehouse in a retail space is placing an undesirable neighbor adjacent to an acceptable neighbor. Retail stores have storefronts to attract people and are dependent on foot traffic. A cannabis warehouse storefront window will probably be covered to conceal whatever is going on inside the building. Will the storefront have store-like signs displayed? This warehouse will guarantee a loss of foot traffic and will bring declining business to Orchid. Why do the warehouse renters want an oxymoron location, a non-storefront? You should not approve a distribution warehouse to replace a retail store space. We own a storefront building around the corner from this proposed cannabis warehouse. The existing tenant said there is not enough foot traffic and they are moving out. The announced coming of a cannabis warehouse probably affected their decision to move. This warehouse's move in to Orchid could be the start of move outs by Orchid businesses. A cannabis warehouse will definitely cause people to walk away from Orchid's retailers. The fact that no foot traffic is generated by a non-storefront store should be enough of a reason to reject the proposed From the Earth cannabis warehouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ponto. Okay. And do any of those who have submitted speaker slips want to speak at this point? Okay. Then, well, you, if you feel it needs it, get up there because you have the right as the appellant to rebut. Or applicant, I'm sorry.
Again, David Moss. Just for the record, that storefront has been vacant for close to 2 years. I just want to make that note for the record.
Okay. So now we'll close the public hearing. And do any of the commissioners have questions of staff? Now let's go on to our deliberations. Commissioner Farini.
Okay, well, looks like the applicant wants to withdraw. And the public comment we heard in the first meeting, and my concern will always be there that area is a sensitive and delicate little hub that is thriving right now under the current model. So I know that community will always be sensitive to what's going on, what's coming in, and sometimes what's leaving. But with that being said, I would be interested in hearing what other commissioners think.
Anyone else? Commissioner Cooney.
It's just a bit unusual to have a late withdrawal like this when we have asked staff and they have prepared findings for denial. It's certainly legal to do, but I don't think we have any basis for determining in advance what project might be put forth by this applicant. So I don't think we have any choice today but to vote to allow the withdrawal of the application and wait to see what comes forward in the future.
I'll just say I agree.
Okay. I've been thinking about this project ever since our last hearing, or our hearing on this project. And I'm going to support this motion, but I wanted to make a few comments. One, I do think that a non-retail project, which is being proposed here, is the wrong thing for a retail site. Fine. But I made a comment at the last hearing that had this been retail, I might have changed my mind. And I think this is an impressive applicant. I want to make the point I made before, I just want to keep making it, that the customers of a retail operation for something like this are not second-class citizens, they're everyday people, and I think that they would be good customers for other businesses, and customers of other businesses would be customers of this, so I don't think we should lose sight of that. Okay. Any other deliberations by commissioners? Then and do we have a motion on the floor for approving the withdrawal?
I make a motion that we approve withdrawal by the applicant.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Blau. Do we need
So Chair Park, Commissioner Freeney, just some added clarification. A recommendation may be that the motion be to approve or to accept the withdrawal of the application by the applicant, and then to make the motion to drop the item from the agenda.
Is that your motion, Mr. Freeney?
I will modify it to that.
And that second still stands.
Okay. Commissioner Bradley?
I just wanted to clarify that I was at the hearing when this was first considered by your commission, but I had to leave before it was concluded. So I wasn't prepared to vote on the item agendized today, but I think it's fine for me to vote on this motion. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Well, then let's, just to be perfectly clear, Mr. Villalobos, why don't you conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Commissioner Freeney.
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Let's move on to the next item. Item number 2, will you read that into the record, Mr. Villalobos?
Yes. Thank you. The following is a hearing on the request of Jerry Ambrose of Suresite Consulting, agent for the applicant Crown Castle, Consider case number 17 CUP 42 and 17 CDP 87 applications filed on October 20th, 2017, and to determine the project is exempt under CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Do we have any ex parte or site visit disclosures? No?
I
Then-
did a drive-by site visit yesterday, yes.
Very good. Then let's have our staff presentation, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Alex Tuttle. I'll be presenting this project to you today. It's a new small-scale wireless facility on Posado Road in Isla Vista. You might recognize the format of this PowerPoint because it's very similar to several others you've seen in the last couple months. So just to orient yourselves, Posado Road in Isla Vista, it's the site is close to the corner of Posado and Camino Mallorca. And the nearest residence is approximately 32 to 35 feet from the existing wood utility pole on which this facility is being located. The project includes a new wireless facility on a 38.5 approximately high wood utility pole. There'd be a support bracket attached to the pole at approximately 22.5 feet above grade with a canister antenna about 2 feet by 10 inch in diameter placed on that support bracket. There would be 3 radio units installed within a shroud, along with 2 conduits running down to the base of the pole. 3 existing communication lines on the pole would be relocated, and there'd be no lighting, no batteries, no generator, anything of that nature. Here are existing elevations of the wood utility pole. You can see the communication lines and existing crossbars. Again, it's 38 feet 4 inches in height. And here is the proposed elevation with the canister antenna being placed here, the radio units within the equipment shroud placed at approximately 12 feet above grade, and the sign at approximately 8 feet above grade. Service to the equipment would be provided by a new pole box approximately 6 feet from the base of the wood utility pole. Here are some photo simulations. This is existing and proposed. Again, you can see the canister antenna located here, new fiber line with down converters, and the equipment shroud located here. And here again, from a different angle, looking to the west, is the existing pole, existing and proposed. Regarding visual resources, as with other projects you've seen similar, it is small cell equipment to be placed on an existing utility pole, so our policies and standards push for co-location, which is occurring in this instance. The equipment would be painted to match and blend in with the surrounding equipment to minimize its visibility. From a health and safety standpoint, the wireless facility would result in exposure of approximately 1% of the limits at the ground level, standing at the base of the pole. And for workers servicing the equipment, it's approximately 48% at the antenna elevation. The project was reviewed for consistency with the comprehensive plan, including the Goleta Community Plan, as well as the coastal zoning ordinance in terms of the various development standards that apply to telecommunication facilities. It was determined to be compliant and consistent with all of those standards. It meets the federal communication requirements in terms of emissions. It's determined to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303. And with that, staff's recommendation is that your commission make the required findings for approval as specified in Attachment A of your staff report. Determine the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 as specified in Attachment C. And approve the project, case number 17 CUP 42 and 17 CDP 87, subject to the conditions of approval included in Attachment B. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Well, Commissioner Brown, having left the commission, I'm at loss to see who might want to ask a question here. Commissioner Blau.
She's still new. I'll help her out. It's probably a question more for the applicant, but I'm just curious about the fact that there's no generator, no backup power. What is different about this cell tower and cell towers that need generators? And I'm just curious, because I know that PG has put us all on notice that they're not going to be completely reliable going forward, that we could have as many as 3 days worth of no power. So I'm just curious to know how it's going to work with what is different about this cell tower that doesn't require backup power.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Blau, I think that would be a better question for the applicant. And Jerry Ambrose is here representing the applicant team. And we can bring him up at your request.
Do we have any other questions of staff? If not, then we'll move on to bring the applicant up. Okay, Mr. Ambrose?
Hey, good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Ambrose. I'm here on behalf of Crown Castle. I don't have anything to add to staff's presentations. Staff's presentation. In regards to your question, a majority of these small cells involve using fiber for power. So they convert the fiber into an electrical type current that allows the facilities to operate. So if there's electricity goes down, the fiber doesn't go down and the sites will stay on air. This particular node and a few others were unable to use that, what they call DC converter system. So these will be tied in directly to electricity. And there is no proposal for a generator as a backup power source. But again, most of them are the power is coming from the fiber, so there's no need for a generator.
Thank you. That's just good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. We don't have any speaker slips for public comment?
No, but I did have a question for Mr. Ambrose.
Oh.
True to the
Mr.
Second
Bradley.
District Forum.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. So in my drive-through site visit yesterday, I was reminded how curious Isla Vista is with the number of tennis shoes that were draped over the utility wires. This block had maybe 4 or 5 pairs, from houses. I think it's a thing that students do. So in understanding that your shroud is going to be like 12 feet from the base elevation, I mean...
The antenna shroud is 3 feet from the pole.
Okay, so I guess my question is, has your firm or have any of your, your cell site companies had any concern with people putting tennis shoes over your equipment on the poles?
I have not personally been made aware of any issues. I'm aware of the phenomenon or whatever you want to call it. I've seen it myself, but I have not heard of any operational concerns with that.
Okay.
On that.
Just wondered. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bradley, would you check to see if there's a speaker slip in that box?
Oh, just
Okay, we do have some public comment. Mr. Warfield?
Mr. Chair, planners, I thank you for letting me speak today. I don't live in the immediate zone.
Would you state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kenneth Warfield. I live at 6822 Sabado Tarde, which is just outside the immediate reception zone.
Sure.
So I really don't have an axe to grind personally, but we've been looking for 40 years at EMF studies, and they change radically from year to year. This use of a higher powered cell system is not studied sufficiently for my satisfaction. We've had lots of back and forth. We've all been reading in the New Yorker for 50 years about EMF transmission and children and all that stuff. We've had this nonsense about Montecito Union School being in a zone that's EMF radiated and causing cancer cluster, when we all knew all along it was the water in Montecito carries radon, which creates cancer. The G5 type radiation activity is still very much unknown on human populations. It's very difficult to study human populations. We have now Johnson & Johnson's baby powder that we've all been powdered with on our butts for years and years, and suddenly they're in the dock for the asbestos in the stuff and the cancer it causes. So I'm just asking you to be very, very careful here with this kind of siting in a residential zone. If it must be placed somewhere, consider a place like the Cloister, which is right across the eucalyptus curtain, where people will stay for a long time, and you can get a good longitudinal idea for morbidity and mortality. Or you could do it someplace in the county like Pill Hill, where they're going to stay for a long, long time, and you can really get a good study for what happens to people when they're 50 years old and they've been irradiated by this stuff for 20, 30. We may find out in 5 or 14 or 20 years that this creates a problem. And is the profit motive from this thing going to drive you? Is it going to drive the county? Is it going to help people make cell phone calls? It's a notoriously bad place to have a cell phone. I know because I live in the neighborhood. It'd be better to place this kind of thing, at least for a few years, in a place where you can get good mortality and morbidity data based on address. Because these people who live in that neighborhood are almost all, there are 3 exceptions, students who are going to be gone in a few years, and you'll never know what happened to them or how. I personally have lived in the Central Pacific as a kid, and I got to where I could be very sensitive to, I can tell you when ionizing radiation is happening. And I got on a ship once, the Savannah, when it came into port, and I got into a place on the ship, and I said, "Ooh, I'm out of here," and jumped right off the ship because I can taste it. And this happens with people. People can learn to live with stuff, but it's not a good idea. I'm lucky to be 70 years old, even with the radiation exposure I've had. And I wouldn't suggest doing that to someone else. So I would ask you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warfield. Did you say you were on the Savannah?
Yes, sir.
The nuclear-powered cargo ship?
Yeah. And
interesting.
the funny thing, I stepped aboard and I said, something's wrong here. And it took me a couple seconds to figure it out. The ship is longitudinal, and they placed the swimming pool athwart ships. And I thought, oh my God, what else did they do wrong here? And I got into a space, I think it was the galley. Could be the wardroom, I don't remember, but I got in there, closed the door, and I could taste the radiation, and I said, I'm out of here. Opened the door and jumped right off that ship. Shortly thereafter, they scuttled her.
There you go.
Filled her full of concrete, by the way, and sank her. That was making her safe.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Tuttle, do you have any response to anything you've heard from staff or the applicant?
No response.
Then we'll close the public hearing. Do any of our planning commissioners have questions of Mr. Tuttle or want to make comments? Mr. Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have questions of Mr. Tuttle. I'm pleased and surprised that he has developed so much expertise in this area, and will look forward to his overseeing projects in the future, because it does seem that they're back on the increase, And given the very limited ability of this commission to determine health and safety issues associated with installations of all sorts, much less those attached to poles, I think we're as eager as anybody to learn more what might be developed by scientific research. Given that our jurisdiction and ability to affect these projects is basically where they're located from an aesthetic standpoint, I look at the photo simulations and I see a clutter of wires going in all directions, poles bent, really defacing what would otherwise be a delightful street, and think, it's taking the lipstick off the pig, but we're not changing, we're not improving anything by adding to these poles. On the other hand, the towers that we've tried to conceal over the years with mixed results are not much better. So it's really a trade-off by our society today. Increased access to technology versus aesthetic beauty of our surroundings. And I think it's unfortunate that this area of the county in Isla Vista, we're actually making worse by adopting this location. That's my comment, not my vote.
Any other comments? Well, this being my district, I'm going to move that we approve the project, adopt staff's recommendations and their recommended findings. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Blau. Any further comments and deliberations on the motion? Mr. Villalobos, will you conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. I think we have, and thank you, Mr. Tuttle. I think we have one more item, that is the trailing of the August 14 minutes. So who wants to address that?
I just had to find my email really quick. Sorry. So both Mr. Wilson and I sent an email to Miss Edie in North County just so she could look into the question. The question was regarding the the timeline for the parking lot cleaning, and so what she responds, she just said the hours they approve for parking lot cleaning are 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekend days only. Unless Mr. Wilson got a different email.
And when you say the items they approved, you're talking about the staff? I'm not.
No, so the question was to, as I understood it, was to clarify what the planning commission approved. And when she says she means you.
Okay.
Yes.
This has stimulated my recollection that the applicant was asking to go to midnight and that we kind of reached a compromise. And I think that this probably reflects what we were all doing. Commissioner Cooney?
Mr. Chair, in light of the information we have received today that this matter's on appeal, it can be worked out, at that level. I appreciate Commissioner Farini very closely watching this project, and I'm sure he'll have the ability to modify those hours if he thinks it's appropriate and the board agrees with him. So I am prepared to support his motion to approve the project. Oh, we did approve, it's just the minutes. we're
Just the
approving.
minutes.
Yeah, to approve the minutes of August 14.
I'll move to support or approve the minutes as presented for the hearing of August 14th.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Blau, did you want to speak?
Yes, you need to do a roll call.
Yes. We'll do a roll call.
Yeah, I'm going to approve the one item. I'm going to vote on the one item on the minutes. The other one I'm going to recuse myself on.
Right. I'm not quite sure. We're bifurcating what? Oh, this particular agenda item from the rest minutes. That's right.
So we can do this a couple of ways. Commissioner Blau can recuse himself from.
Actually, just call the roll and recuse myself in minutes entirely.
Fair.
You've got 3 others or 4 others to approve the rest of the minutes. You're good to go.
Wise decision.
All right. Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
No vote.
Abstain.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
And Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
The motion's carried and the meeting is adjourned.
To resounding applause from the audience.